My name is Michael Carson. I'm 44 years old, born and raised in Lincoln, Nebraska. I run a small residential construction business that's kept a roof over my family's head and put two nephews through community college. I don't talk much, and I don't ask for much either. But this broke something in me I didn't even know could break. It started on a gray Thursday in April, the kind of day where even the sun seems to grieve. That was the day I buried my father, James Carson, Marine vet, small-town mechanic, and the kind of man who believed your word was your contract. We buried him with a watch he wore every day for 27 years. A simple silver timepiece with a cracked face and a leather strap worn soft from sweat and engine grease. He told me once he hoped to pass it down to me one day, but he never got the chance. So when I found that exact same watch in my wife's gym bag 2 weeks after the funeral, still ticking, still warm from someone's wrist, I felt like the world stopped. Not broke, not a replica, the exact same one. The little scratch on the back from when I dropped it as a kid, the smudge of faded blue paint under the glass from Dad's last pickup restoration. I knew it, just like I knew what came next. I wish I could say I reacted like a rational man. I didn't. I just stared. For 10 minutes straight, standing in our bedroom with the gym bag flopped open on the bed. I stared at that watch like it had just clawed its way out of the dirt. And maybe it had. See my wife, Emily. We'd been married 16 years, met through a church softball league. She taught 3rd grade at one of the elementary schools just outside of town. Used to laugh loud and hug longer than needed. Somewhere over the last year, she'd gone. Quiet. Not cruel. Not even distant. Just distant enough. Started running, eating clean, joining some local yoga group. She stopped telling me about her days, and I stopped asking. That's on me. I'll take the hit for that part. But this went deeper than growing apart. I remember every second of that funeral, the ache of shaking hands with people who knew my dad better than I ever would, the preacher's cracked voice, the rain that started exactly as the final shovel of dirt hit the coffin, and I remember Don Fields, the funeral director, clean-cut 40-something, impossibly white teeth and eyes that didn't blink enough. He ran Fields Memorial, the local mortuary, with the fake fireplace and soft jazz on loop. He wasn't just professional, he was familiar. Too familiar. I'd chalked it up to small-town kindness when he offered Emily a tissue before I'd even seen her cry, when he touched her back just above the waist as he walked her to the car, when she genuinely smiled at him during the reception line. You don't think much of those things when your heart's broken and your hands are numb from gripping the sides of a coffin. But now I remembered. All of it. The way she avoided eye contact when I mentioned how helpful Dawn had been. The way she started leaving the house for walks around the cemetery on weekends. And now my father's watch, buried with him, sealed in his casket, placed on his wrist by my own damn hands, was in her gym bag. Still ticking. That night, I didn't confront her. I didn't rage or scream. I sat on the porch with a bottle of 4 roses and watched the sun go down. The next morning, while she was out on another one of her long runs, I drove to the cemetery. Graceland Memorial. Section D Plot 27. I knew it by heart. What I didn't expect was the fresh dirt. It had been just over 2 weeks. The topsoil should have been flattened, maybe a little faded, but this looked disturbed, turned over, like someone had been digging. I checked the security office at the far end of the grounds. Claimed I was a family member worried about vandalism. The teenager working the desk couldn't care less, handed me a thumb drive of footage from the night before and went back to scrolling TikTok. That evening, I watched it. Minute 02:13 a.m. Emily, in her black hoodie, entering the prep room of Fields Memorial through the side door. With Don. She was laughing. He had a key. They weren't there to mourn. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't go to work the next morning. I sat at the kitchen table while Emily made coffee, her hair still damp from the shower, and pretended not to notice the bag of overnight clothes in the back seat of her car. Going to Mom's for the weekend, she said, not meeting my eye. She needs help reorganizing the attic. Sure, I said. And then I lied for the first time in a long time. I'll be doing a client walkthrough down in Omaha, probably be gone overnight. She nodded like it didn't matter, like none of it mattered. And then she was gone. So was I. Not to Omaha, not to the job site. I was on a mission. Because I wasn't just a man with a broken heart anymore. I was a man with nothing left to lose and a father to honor. When you lose a father, you expect to carry grief. But you don't expect to carry suspicion. I didn't tell anyone what I saw in the footage. Not yet. Not even my sister Rachel, who'd been the only one holding me up during the funeral. She always said Emily looked polished, but cold, but I used to brush it off. Now I wondered what else I'd missed. I spent the next 3 days playing detective in my own house. Every minute Emily was gone, I searched. Not for her phone, not for confrontation, for confirmation. She'd always kept things tidy, painfully so. A toothbrush lined with the edge of the ceramic cup. Towels folded hotel style, but people like her, they hide messes in the structure. It was in a locked drawer in the hallway credenza that I found it. A manila envelope, no markings, no label. Inside 4 hotel receipts. A thank you card unsigned in cursive handwriting for making even the darkest places feel sacred. A printed photo. My father's casket. Open. Unusual considering we'd asked for a closed casket service. He looked peaceful but too pale, too still, and standing just off camera in the background mirror, Don Fields, holding something. A watch. That watch. My vision blurred, not from sadness, from pressure, like the kind in your head before an explosion. What kind of person opens the casket after the service to retrieve a dead man's watch? The kind of person who believes it belonged to them. Because maybe it did if Emily had given it to him, if she had lied to me even about that. That night, I didn't go home. I drove, nowhere in particular, circling blocks like a man being followed by something he couldn't name. And I remembered. 2 months ago, I came home early from a job site in Beatrice. Rain had shut down the framing crew. I thought I'd surprise Emily. Instead, I found her on the phone in the garage, sitting in my father's old recliner, the one I hadn't been able to throw out yet. She was laughing. "I miss your voice," she said, low, intimate. "You always make me feel like I can breathe." I stood frozen in the mudroom, hand still on the door handle. When she finally hung up, I didn't confront her, just walked in loud like I hadn't heard a thing. She smiled and asked if I wanted soup. And like a coward, I said yes. Now I knew whose voice that had been. Not a coworker, not her sister, Dawn. And I wanted to know how long it had been going on. I reached out to a buddy of mine, Jason, a tech guy who owed me for installing his deck for half what I should have charged. He came by the next day and helped me recover deleted texts from Emily's backup folder, the oldest one, nearly 11 months ago. It was easier than I thought. He doesn't even ask where I go anymore. No one's ever made me feel like this. I think I fell for you in the embalming room. The embalming room. That's where he'd won her. That's where my father had been laid out like a canvas. And that's where she decided her heart belonged to the man slicing my father open and draining the last warmth from his body. I don't remember throwing up, but I remember the mess. I remember kneeling on the garage floor afterward, gripping the tire iron I hadn't used in years. I remember thinking, if I killed him, would it be justice or just noise? But I didn't want blood. I wanted ruin. I wanted memory. I wanted to take everything he touched and make it rot from the inside out. The first step wasn't emotional. It was structural. I dug into Fields Memorial's records. Not hard funeral homes have to file business statements with the county. Turns out Don Fields had been running the business into the red for the past 5 years. Over-leveraged loans, fines from OSHA, a pending complaint for mislabeling cremains. He needed a bailout. He needed Emily. She had perfect credit. A second mortgage quietly approved 6 months ago told me she had co-signed something. My own wife had bet our financial future on a man who made a living painting the dead. So I hired someone, an actor, a guy named Vernon, late 60s, who looked like a war vet with a prosthetic leg and sad eyes. He walked into Fields Memorial asking about a service for his late brother. RRT offered a cash retainer and asked for special handling. Don took the bait. What he didn't know was that Vernon had a mic on him, that he recorded everything, including Don joking about upcharging for sentiment and admitting that he sometimes reused caskets to save costs. That's illegal. That's a license violation. That's also, evidence. I sent it anonymously to the state board, along with photos Vernon took in the prep room, some of them damning. Improper storage, lax security, open containers near preserved bodies. And then I waited. Not long. 2 weeks later, the audit began. Don's reputation took its first hit when the Lincoln Daily Ledger ran a quiet headline, "Local Mortuary Faces Compliance Investigation." Emily didn't say anything about it, but I noticed the way her phone stopped buzzing for days, how she started keeping wine by her bedside, how she asked out of nowhere, "Do you ever wish we'd moved away when we were younger?" "No," I said, "because I'm not the one who needs to run." She blinked, stunned, but I just walked past her. Let her feel that. The unraveling was slow, surgical. I made sure of it. I contacted every family Don had handled in the past 2 years and sent anonymous tip-offs about potential mishandling, included a printed copy of a clause in the mortuary contract about post-service tampering. One of them, a retired judge, filed a formal complaint. Then the news picked it up. Then Don's creditor called the note on his business loan. The final blow came when I found the deed. Emily had transferred her name onto the Fields Memorial property. A legal arrangement. They weren't married, but she'd become a part owner. So when I reported the accounting discrepancies, both of them got flagged for investigation. That meant the IRS. That meant the state attorney's office. That meant court dates. Emily came home crying a week later, said she was being harassed by agents who didn't understand. They said, "You submitted documents." "Did you?" she asked. I looked her dead in the eyes. "No, but maybe you should ask the man who dug up my father's watch." She turned pale, whispered, "You don't understand, Michael. You weren't here. You don't know what it's been like." I stood up, calm. "I was here, Emily. I was here when you slept with the man who embalmed my father. I was here when you lied about yoga classes and drained our savings to prop up his failing empire of corpses." She started sobbing, apologizing. I walked out and didn't come back for 3 days. When I did return, I served her with divorce papers, filed under emotional abuse and financial betrayal. And the best part, thanks to her co-ownership with Don Fields, she was liable for all debts, all penalties, and all violations tied to his business. I had the house. I had our joint accounts frozen. And I had my father's watch back in the velvet box where it belonged. But more than that, I had peace. Because sometimes revenge isn't about pain. It's about silence. The silence when a predator realizes the grave he dug was his own. There's a certain kind of silence that follows a reckoning. It's not peace, not yet. It's the kind of quiet you hear in a funeral home after hours soft jazz playing in an empty lobby, the scent of embalming chemicals just faint enough to unsettle you, the kind of silence where something has ended, but no one's yet dared to admit it out loud. That's what the house felt like now. Emily had moved out 3 weeks after the divorce papers were served. She didn't fight it, barely spoke. She packed quietly, cried once, and left a note on the fridge that read, "You win." But I wasn't playing to win. Not really. I just wanted the truth to matter again. Don Fields, however, wasn't done pretending. Not yet. The man had a gift for wearing grief like a tuxedo. He polished his voice when speaking to the public, took interviews with calm conviction, and had his lawyer release a public statement claiming the investigation was politically motivated by a disgruntled former associate. He meant me. I didn't respond. Instead, I waited because I knew what was coming. I had the real leverage. You see, it wasn't just the funeral violations that were going to ruin him. It wasn't even the tampering with my father's grave. It was Paula Bellamy. Passé. 6 months before my father passed, Don handled the funeral of one Edward Bellamy, Vietnam vet, former fire chief, beloved community figure. His widow Paula told me over coffee at the Sunspot Diner that she'd noticed little things were off during the viewing. He had a scar on his temple, she whispered, from the warehouse fire, but it wasn't there anymore. The man in the casket, it didn't look like him. I asked if she'd ever said anything. She nodded. Don told me he used special makeup to smooth it, said it would help me remember him without the trauma. I was too shocked to argue. What she didn't know was that Don had switched Edward's body with another to hide the fact he'd cremated the wrong corpse earlier that week. I'd found the shipping invoices through an anonymous tip, a crematorium record listing Body B shipped to the wrong family. It matched Edward Bellamy's timeline, and it matched Don's handwriting on the paperwork. That was criminal negligence, and it wasn't just malpractice anymore. It was cover-up. I took that folder straight to the state board and the family attorney handling Paula's trust. By the following Monday, Don Fields had his license formally revoked. His parlor was shut down, his name pulled from the regional funeral registry, and for the first time since my father's service, the town started whispering about Don the way they used to whisper about creeps.
But
I'd thought that would be enough. That maybe once the truth was out, I could move on. I even started rebuilding my old workshop, something I hadn't touched since before Dad passed. Cleaned out sawdust, sanded planks, repaired the table Dad and I had built together when I was 23. But healing's a funny thing. Just when you think the infection's gone, something reminds you it's still festering. For me, it was a letter. No return address, just my name scrawled in red ink. Inside a single photograph. Emily, Dawn, together, laughing, at a restaurant. From last night. It was dated, time-stamped, and there was a message on the back typed in small black font. And just because the house fell doesn't mean the termites died. I sat back, breath shallow. It wasn't just that they were still seeing each other. It was the fact that someone else, wanted me to know. Someone watching. Someone who knew exactly where to press to make the wound bleed again. The first thing I did was check my home security system. 3 of the outside cameras had been disabled. The garage one had been ripped clean off the wall. Whoever this was, they weren't amateurs, but they were sloppy. I reviewed the logs, found a 3-minute window where the front door sensor had been triggered after midnight. And the next morning, I found muddy boot prints on the edge of the porch railing right beneath my father's workshop window. Someone had been inside, but nothing was stolen, nothing moved. Just the letter, just the picture. That's when I knew this wasn't about money anymore. It was about memory. And memory, when poisoned, becomes obsession. I drove to the police station, but they said there wasn't much they could do unless I could prove the person had entered the house. The door wasn't forced. Nothing had been damaged. Could have been a prank, they said. A prank? Who the hell jokes with grief? That's when I remembered something my dad used to say when I was younger, usually when he caught me trying to fix something too fast. Measure twice, cut once, and always check for rot before you hammer the nail. I had been measuring the wrong thing. This wasn't about Dawn anymore. This wasn't even about Emily. This was about someone else. Someone who knew Dawn and Emily were still together. Someone who knew how to break into a home undetected. Someone who knew where my cameras were. So I started my own list. Nishi. Suspect number 1, Josh Reynolds. Emily's cousin, worked in home security for 2 years, had been at our house for barbecues and once got into a shouting match with my dad over politics. Too dumb to pull this off cleanly. Eliminated. Suspect number 2, Melanie Ward. Dawn's ex-wife. Divorced 6 years ago. Rumors say he cheated with a client's daughter. Has motive. Is smart. But she lives in Colorado now. Still, I mark her as possible. Suspect number 3, Harold Denton. The graveyard groundskeeper. Odd man, soft-spoken. Once told me he saw Emily and Dawn praying by my father's headstone at 3 a.m. I thought it was just grief. But now, Harold had keys to everything. Yay. I paid Harold a visit. Found him smoking behind the mausoleum, humming some gospel hymn off-key. Tough time of year, I said, trying to sound casual. He squinted at me. You come for answers or revenge, Michael. That stopped me cold. I came for the truth. He nodded real slow. Then I'll show you something. He led me down to the bottom floor of the tool shed behind the crematorium wing, a place I hadn't even known existed. Opened a box of files, pulled one labeled Carson James. Inside, photos, notes, always correspondence. Emails printed out between Dawn and Emily. And one of them was dated 2 weeks before my father died. Subject line, and he suspects. The body of the message read, if he brings it up, I'll say it's paranoia. But you were right. He noticed us at the diner. I think he might say something to Michael soon. I stood there shaking. My dad hadn't just died. He'd been watching the people around him collapse the world he built. And it killed him. Harold lit another cigarette, didn't say a word. I left without speaking, without thanking him. I drove straight home and cried on the floor of the garage like a goddamn child. The next morning, I woke with one thought. They don't get to haunt me anymore. And that's when I called Rachel, my sister, told her everything. She listened, silent the whole time. And when I finished, she said, then let's bury them the way they buried Dad. But this time, let's bring shovels made of steel. A year passed. Some days it felt like a decade. Other times it felt like I was still stuck in the exact moment I opened that gym bag and saw my father's watch ticking like a ghost. But time, as I've learned, doesn't wait for clarity. It just moves. Like a river. You either swim with it or drown under what used to be. I didn't drown. I rebuilt. Not just my home, myself. After the second burial, I started spending more time at my dad's old workshop. It was quiet there. Smelled like cedar and motor oil and old sweat, the kind of place where the past wasn't trying to haunt you, just sit beside you. I found things I'd forgotten. His old belt buckle with the Marine emblem, a small carving of an elk he made for me when I was 6, and a letter, folded inside a tin cigar box beneath the drawer lining. It wasn't addressed to anyone, just titled, "If I Go First." Michael, or whoever finds this, I've lived a long time with a simple rule. Don't leave a mess someone else has to clean up. But life doesn't always give us that luxury. If I'm gone, don't worry about the house or the money. Worry about the people, the ones you can't replace. I was never good at words, not like your mother. But I know how to build things that last. So build something better than what I had. Build a life without resentment, because resentment is just a cage you decorate to feel like home. If you've been wronged, make it right, but don't become the one who wrongs others in the process. And if you can forgive, not for them, for you. I love you, kid. Dad. I sat with that letter for an hour. Just sat. No music, no thoughts, just tears. It wasn't the kind of crying you do when you're hurt. It was the kind you do when you realize you made it through. That letter didn't excuse what Emily did, or what Don did, or what they took from my family, but it reminded me that I didn't need to carry them with me anymore. I'd done what needed doing, and now it was time to stop bleeding in the places I used to be proud of. Rachel helped me start a foundation in Dad's name Carson built. We funded apprenticeships for young men and women in the trades, carpenters, plumbers, electricians, welders. Every year on his birthday, we sponsor one full scholarship. No GPA minimum, no essay. Just a letter of intent and a willingness to work. First recipient was a 19-year-old named Casey. Lost his dad to cancer, worked nights at the lumberyard, said he wanted to build something my mom could be proud of. I told him I knew exactly what that felt like. As for Emily, I never spoke to her again. Not once. Not when I saw her name listed in the bankruptcy filings. Not when a friend mentioned she was working front desk at a veterinary clinic 2 towns over. Not even when a mutual acquaintance said she was asking about me. The chapter was closed. And Don, he was arrested 7 months after the story broke. Forgery, tax fraud, mishandling of remains. He took a plea deal, 5 years, suspended sentence, lifetime ban from the mortuary industry. He applied to be a life insurance adjuster last I heard. Fitting. Man spends his life burying people for profit, and now he gets paid when others die. But I didn't need revenge anymore. He'd already dug his own grave. I walk past my father's marker every Sunday now, bring a cup of coffee, sometimes talk to him. Most days I just sit. I don't ask for advice. I don't apologize. I just let the wind move through the grass and trust that he knows. Knows I finally figured out how to carry his name without letting it break me. Knows that I found my footing again, one heavy step at a time. Knows that I didn't become like them. Because here's the truth. They can cheat. They can lie. They can dig through the things we love and desecrate what's sacred. But what they leave behind, the mess, the shame, the debt, the broken pieces, those don't have to define us. We get to decide what we build from what they tried to destroy. And I built something strong. A name, a foundation, a legacy. And that's what lasts. I used to believe some stories ended with a door closing, that once justice was served and the guilty were exposed, peace would walk in like some final character in a play. But peace isn't a person, it's a decision. One you have to keep making, every day. Especially when you live in a small town where everyone knows how your story ended, or at least thinks they do. Hey. The first time I saw Emily in person again, it was by accident. I was picking up lumber at Callahan's Supply when she walked in through the side entrance. Her hair was shorter curled like it had been back when we first dated. She was thinner too, like life had been sanding her down slowly. She saw me, I saw her, and in that moment all the noise from the past, the grief, the betrayal, the rage, just paused. She walked past me, didn't say a word, didn't even nod. I didn't either. Some things don't need closure. Some things just need to be left where they were buried. But it shook something loose in me. That night, I sat out on the back porch with Rachel. She'd brought over some barbecue and 2 bottles of good beer. "You saw her?" she asked. I nodded, didn't speak. "Good." She leaned back and looked at the stars, same way our dad used to. "Do you ever wonder if she regrets it? I asked quietly. Rachel didn't hesitate. Doesn't matter if she does. She took years from me. No, Rachel said firmly. She took the version of your life you thought you had. But that version was already dying. You just didn't see it. What you've built since, that's real. That's yours. I didn't say anything, but she was right. I hadn't just rebuilt, I'd redesigned. From the foundation up. In the months that followed, I kept getting emails from people who'd read Leo Palmer's article about Don Fields. Some were survivors of funeral fraud. Others just wanted to thank someone for speaking up about what most people ignored. One letter stuck out. It came from a woman in Boise, Idaho. Her husband had died during a military training exercise. She discovered a year later that the body she buried wasn't his. A mix-up, or so the mortuary said. But after reading my story, she realized the symptoms of malpractice matched. She'd filed suit now, was building her case. She ended her letter with, "I thought no one would believe me. But then I read what you did, and I realized silence only protects the guilty." I printed that letter and pinned it on the wall above my workbench. It reminded me why I hadn't just moved on, why I spoke. Because silence is a luxury when you haven't been hurt. For the rest of us, silence is just a cage made of shame. One evening, about a year and a half after the reburial, I got a call. It was from Harold Denton, the cemetery groundskeeper. "Thought you'd want to know," he said. "Someone's been visiting your dad's grave after hours." "Who?" "Not sure. Keeps coming in after sunset. Leaves little things, flowers, notes. Doesn't stick around. You think it's Emily. Maybe. Could be someone else, but they're always quiet, respectful." I didn't say anything for a moment. Then, let them come. "You sure?" "Yeah. Some debts can't be repaid with words, but showing up counts for something." "Whoa." I never found out who it was, and maybe that's for the best. Let the ghosts walk. Let the guilt breathe. Let people feel whatever they need to feel. So long as they don't take anything else from the man who raised me, they can stand there as long as they like. That ground is sacred, and now it's protected.
Yay.
One day, I walked into the shop and found Casey, our first Carson-built scholarship recipient, sitting on the workbench, his face pale. "You all right?" I asked. He looked up, eyes red. "My mom passed," he said, 2 nights ago. Stroke. No warning. I sat down beside him, didn't say anything for a moment. Then I said the only thing I knew to be true. You never stop missing them, but you do start carrying them differently. He nodded, tears falling now. Then I handed him a photo of me and my dad in the original workshop. We build to remember, not just to survive. He looked at the photo, then at me. "I want to build her something. A bench. For the garden she loved." "Then that's what we'll do," I said. "Together."
Dad.
Because that's the lesson no one tells you. When people betray you, they don't just steal your trust. They try to steal your direction, your purpose, your peace. But peace isn't something you get from justice. It's something you make plank by plank, nail by nail, choice by choice. I didn't get to save my father from what Don and Emily did, but I saved his memory. I restored his dignity. I carried his name forward without the weight of silence. And in doing so, I saved myself. Some names carry weight long after the voices behind them are gone. Carson. In this town that used to mean nothing more than an honest mechanic and a quiet family who kept to themselves. We weren't flashy. We weren't the kind of people who got written up in the paper or asked to sponsor the 4th of July parade. We were steady, we showed up, and we didn't quit. That changed after the story broke, not in a fame and flashbulbs kind of way, but in whispers, respect, quiet nods at the grocery store, a free drink at the VF, a father shaking my hand after his daughter got accepted into the trades program we'd helped fund. We weren't a grieving family anymore. We were an example. It was strange at first, being recognized for grief. People thanked me for what I did. Some said they would have crumbled under the weight. Some admitted they had until they saw that someone else stood up. And every time I felt 2 things, gratitude that someone saw the truth, guilt because I hadn't done it for them. At least not at first. I did it for Dad, for me, for what was stolen when Emily and Don turned something sacred into a sideshow. But somewhere along the way, it became bigger than us. And that terrified me. Because when your story becomes a symbol, people stop seeing you as a man. They see you as an outcome, a lesson. They forget the nights you wake up sweating, the mornings when grief still sits in your gut like cement. So I started writing. Not a book, not a blog, just pages, scraps of thoughts, Letters to my father, some addressed, some not. I didn't share them, didn't even reread most of them, but I wrote every day for 6 months. Here's one I still keep taped inside my toolbox. Dad, I thought by now I'd feel lighter, that exposing them would let the air back in. But sometimes it still feels like I'm holding your watch in my palm, wondering if it's real, wondering what you'd say if you saw what I did in your name. Would you be proud, or would you say, let it go, son, you already won? I don't know the answer, but I know this. I'm still building. I haven't quit. And I carry you in every nail I drive, every kid I mentor, every time I teach someone that dignity ain't something people can take. It's something you decide to hold on to. And I'm holding on. I love you. Carson built, kept growing. We got our first grant from the state to expand into neighboring counties, started a weekend workshop for veterans looking to learn carpentry. We called it Honor Wood because every cut tells a story. And the best part, it gave me something I hadn't realized I was missing. Community. Not just people who supported me, people who understood, who had buried more than relatives, who had seen systems fail and lies win. People who needed to build again, even if just for a few hours. Sometimes we didn't even talk. We just sawed, sanded, smoothed edges, glued joins, and left the mess outside. One night after a particularly long build session, a man stayed behind. Vietnam, vet. Name was Travis. Hadn't said much all month. He walked up, hands calloused and shaking, and said, "You gave me back something I didn't know I still had." "What's that?" I asked. He looked down at the cedar table he'd just finished. His voice cracked. Purpose. And in that moment, I finally understood what Dad meant in that letter. Resentment is a cage, but purpose is the key. I'd wasted so much energy thinking revenge would heal me, that if I burned everything they built, I'd feel whole. But it wasn't the fire that rebuilt me. It was the wood, the sweat, the slow, careful process of making something useful again. That weekend, Rachel and I visited Dad's grave. We brought Casey and 2 new scholarship recipients, let them place flags and leave flowers. We didn't talk about Dawn or Emily or any of it. We just told stories, laughed a little, shared what we were building next. At one point, Casey turned to me and asked, "Was your dad a quiet guy?" "Very," I said. But when he spoke, Rachel added, "People listened." Casey nodded. "I want to be that kind of man." I smiled. Then build slow. Listen more than you talk, and never let someone else decide what your name means. That's what I want you, whoever's reading this, to understand. What they took from me wasn't just trust. It wasn't even the watch, or the money, or the dignity. It was the illusion that life was stable. They shattered that, and for a while, I hated them for it. But then I realized, maybe things have to break before you know what's worth salvaging. And when you build back, build with hardwood, build with purpose, build with names that still mean something when the wind blows cold and there's no one left but you and the sound of what you made with your own hands. Because names don't echo in silence. They echo in what you build. There's a kind of silence that isn't empty. It's full with memory, with breath, with a strange sense that everything that needed to be said finally has been. That's the kind of silence I live in now. Not because I've forgotten, because I've outlived it. A few months after Carson Built's expansion, I got a letter from the State Mortuary Board. Not about Dawn, not about the investigation. This was different. Inside was a single paragraph. Per your prior complaints and submitted evidence, we have permanently closed the file regarding Fields Memorial's violations. Records will remain public and searchable. The license will not be reinstated. Thank you for your service to the families of Nebraska. That was it. No grand announcement, no celebration, just a sealed file. A footnote in state records, a name with a line.